It's Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. We are your progressive, secular, imperfect homeschool mom friends. So if you've been feeling like a fish out of water in the homeschool community, trying to find secular, progressive homeschool mom friends, we're your people. Welcome. You found us. Come hang out. And yes, we get fired up and we let some language fly from time to time. A mutual friend of ours that we're in a group chat with the other day was sitting alone in her minivan waiting to pick up one of her kids. It was like, your thing on Spotify has an explicit content. And I'm like, fuck yeah, it does, right? Like every once in a while, it happens, right? So yeah. We do. Today's topic is screens and homeschooling, finding the balance. So we'll jump into that momentarily, but we like to start off our episodes with a recap of our respective weeks. Here's the deal. We both love homeschooling, right? Am I speaking correctly, Amanda?
Yep, definitely.
Okay. We love parenting, right?
Also,
like,
yep.
We're not those people who are like, can't stand being around my kids. When does school start again? Right? Like all that stuff, right? We love hanging with our kids. We love being with our kids. But neither one of us are ever going to pretend that sometimes our weeks just aren't complete shit shows. And that's part of the genesis of our podcast is like, there's all these homeschool influencers that are out there and everything is shiny and perfect and clean and hair done, right? Today, if you're watching on video, today is what I like to call my hairdo. Today is best intentions, right? It was, I am going to wash and dry my hair before this episode. And we got the washing part, but the drying part, not so much. So if you're watching on video, you will watch my hair dry in real time and frizz in real time. So best intentions, right? Some weeks are a shit show. So Amanda, how's your week been?
Well, talking about best intentions, I had like a little mini panic trying to get dressed for tonight or for today's recording, because you know how when you travel for an extended period of time, even a couple weeks, you don't pack enough clothes for like a couple of weeks. You pack like maybe 6 things that can be mixed and matched and whatever, with the intention of doing laundry. The laundry actually happened, but we've been gone now and traveling for several weeks at this point. All with, one suitcase of clothing. So today I was like, have I worn that for recording in the last month? Like, are people going to think that I only have this one shirt or this one dress? And I could not remember. And I was running late because I'm kind of on vacation time, which means like I'm handling the stuff that I need to handle, but not very well and not very timely. So I didn't have time to like try to go back and look at other clips. So if you're actually like watching the vlog version instead of just listening, and I have had this particular combination on multiple times in the last few weeks, I'm sorry. But really beyond that, I don't have too many complaints. Like I said, we're traveling. It's been a combination of fun travel and visiting my parents and extended family, and for the most part that's been really good. It's fun. We live quite far from family in general, and we don't get to see them a whole lot. So it's always fun when I get to see the kiddo connecting with the grandparents. And, last night I had to be on a very long board meeting that was a whole other thing. That'd be like my one real shit spot in the week. But I popped out to get a drink, and the kid was sitting with his grandparents at the dining room table, and they were playing this history timeline game. And
I love that game.
Yeah, they were having a lot of fun. And it was just one of those like really heartwarming. And then of course, the 10-year-old's like, everyone knows when that bomb happened. My mom was like, actually, no, not everyone knows. And my dad was having a good chuckle because of course my dad knew, right? He's also a history buff. So yeah, generally speaking, our life is okay. And, we're traveling home soon, so things will probably get crazy again, and I'll have to get off of vacation time and back into real time. We'll see how that goes.
There you go. Well, talking about juggling real life, mom life, I feel like this was just the perfect example, right? So you're talking, I'm listening to, I'm like, I totally got that. First of all, I think our audience is made up of so many busy moms who are probably also wearing the same, like I've done that where I'm like, forget about number of episodes in a row. How many days in a row have I worn, right? Like that they're like not even worried about your clothing. So I'm listening to you talking about that, right? And then the dog is scratching at the door. Okay, I'd like to leave. So I open the door while you're talking. And then she just kind of stood there like, no, I'd like the option to leave, but I don't actually. Okay, fine. Thank you. And then while I'm kind of leaning over here doing that, the phone rings, and Amanda and I are in the process of building a website. It's our web designer. I'm like, okay, I'll get back to that later. Right. So it's the juggling of life, Yep. Yesterday, I've had a good week overall. I mean, busy, but what else is new? Right. But Yesterday was an interesting day. So these episodes live on forever and people listen to them, going forward for a really long time. But today's Thursday. We normally record on Wednesdays. That's how busy our week is. That was my fault. Friday last week, so 6 days ago, was the Microsoft collapse where I don't even
Mhm.
know what happened. I'm not super techie. And so everything stopped working, right? Like all the planes had to be grounded. And I went to the bank on Friday during that whole thing. The tellers couldn't use their computers. I went to Chipotle. They couldn't do online ordering. Like everything was affected, right? So my daughter's best friend was supposed to fly in yesterday, and the airlines are all still playing catch up, trying to get all these people rescheduled. Apparently, Delta has bags just piled up everywhere. Like they can't figure out how to get the bags to the people and the whole thing, right? So my daughter's best friend was supposed to fly in yesterday. My daughter's 15, he's 14. So at 14 in the States, I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but you still have to fly unaccompanied minor where your parents check you in like luggage and then they hand you over to someone who signs for you, right? So I was like, no problem. So he was supposed to land at noon, which was part of the reason Amanda and I rescheduled. I got up in the morning to go to the bathroom at like 6:30 in the morning because my pelvic floor might as well be made of tissue paper. And I happened to check my phone while I was up, and his mom was like, his flight's been canceled. Okay, she's like, I'm working on rebooking him. So he was supposed to fly out of Newark, which is 20 minutes from their house. And instead, this woman gets Mother of the Year. She rebooked him on a flight out of LaGuardia in New York City. And it meant she had to drive home during rush hour traffic, which is like awful. So she rebooks him. He was supposed to get here at 5:30. I'm like, no problem. I had a meeting at 7. I told my 7 o'clock person, hey, I might have to take the meeting in the car, but I got this. I'm watching his flight. Delayed, delay, delay. He's on the tarmac. He sat on the tarmac for longer than the length of the flight. And so it was like the whole day was just kind of, and I didn't mind. It was fine. I mean, it just meant shifting, right? It's the juggling act we do as moms and
Mhm.
and busy people and all that stuff, where it was like, okay, shift that, shift that, shift that. Like every time he was like on a different flight, the flight's delayed. My meeting's here, my meeting's there, you know?
Mhm.
So it's just been a week like that where it's just like, okay, the best laid plans, right? Speaking of my
Mhm.
hairdo, the best laid plans, great intentions, never actually happened. So yeah. So, but overall, it's been good. And I'm so happy he's here. He's been my daughter's best friend for like 4 years, and they get together and they have the sweetest relationship. So I'm so happy he's here. He'll be here through the weekend. So it'll be fun. I've got a fourth kid for a few days.
Nice. And
Yeah.
yeah, I totally we were supposed to fly home this week, and because of all of the flight issues that are happening and all of that jazz, we ended up being able to very easily push it out next week. They were like, "What? Someone actually wants to leave next week?" Like, yes,
Thank
we'll
you for
take.
lessening
Yeah.
our stress.
Yeah, like we'll take your seat. And so hopefully, right, from where my parents live, they live in a smaller town in the Midwest. So we fly a very small regional airport into a bigger airport, and we have a connection, all of that. And I was like, I just do not want to get to Dallas Fort Worth and be stuck there because it's like still a real mess there. And I was like, I don't want any part of that. If we can, hopefully, once we actually go to the airport, we just have a nice smooth trip home if we wait until next week. So yeah,
Exactly.
uh,
Yeah.
that's a
So
mess.
he made it, so that was good. Hey, and I'm feeling like a pretty good parent because at the TSA yesterday, so I couldn't go through the pre-check line because I had like a gate pass to go pick him up at
Mm,
the gate, and so I had to like take off my shoes and do the thing. There was a sign at the TSA reminding people not to put their children in the little bins and put them on the conveyor belt. And so I feel like a rock star parent because it wouldn't have ever occurred to me to put my child through an X-ray machine on a conveyor belt in a dirty plastic bin. So, I mean, there's all levels of winning, and I'm killing it according to that sign.
yep. You
So I'll
you are
take it.
on it. Yeah, there you go. Oh Lord. All right. Well, today's topic, we are talking about screen time. So, talk about a hot button issue. Some people love screens and utilize them very heavily in both their home life and their homeschooling journey. But some people go more the Luddite route and avoid screens altogether, right? Screens are often a great source of tension between parents and kiddos. I don't know how often we see screen time being used in disciplinary action, right? In homeschool groups, and I'm sure in other parenting groups as well. You see this idea your kid did something wrong, take away the screen times. Um, So really challenging, right? And then you add on top of that the complexity of trying to keep kids safe online in this digital world. I know in our personal friend group that just came up again this week with some discussions around that. So I don't think we're going to have any answers for you today, but we are definitely going to talk. Megan and I use screens very differently in our homes. We have very different ideas around them, and we're going to talk about what works for us and what doesn't work for us, and hopefully give you some ideas of things to try, and also maybe just, a little bit of comfort of like, I don't have it figured out. But other people also don't have it figured out. And we're all doing okay. So
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, we talk frequently about the fact that we homeschool on very different ends of the spectrum. I am a super loosey goosey hippie unschooler, and Amanda is an aggressive academic homeschooler. So we do things very differently, but it's really interesting how often we agree. Like last week, we were talking about, early childhood standards, and we were both like, absolutely not. Like everything here is going right. So there's plenty of things that we agree upon, even though we get there through a very different route, which is always interesting. And the most important thing is we respect the choices that the other has made for their respective offspring, right?
yes.
So this is a topic where we differ quite a bit. So we thought we'd share what's working for each of us in case you're looking to find balance with screens. Maybe you pull a little bit of what I do, a little bit of what Amanda does, or you find a happy medium somewhere else. And that maybe it kind of it just sparks some thinking for you about the way screens might be able to be less of a source of tension in your house or an issue in your household. Maybe, hopefully.
Yeah, right. All right. So before we dive in, we wanted to share one resource that we both agree on, and that's Hub of Curiosity. So Megan's 12-year-old writes for the school newspaper. My kiddo is currently on a hiatus while we travel. We found it a little hard to be disassembling things, but he's a member of the Electronics Disassembly Club that they host. And Hub of Curiosity classes, they take place on OutSchool, which is one of those safe online environments. I do a lot of things on OutSchool because I know for sure that he's not going to go down a rabbit hole of links or be on something or have someone contact him through their chat feature or anything like that. It's really safe, and I appreciate that. So it's an A+ screen resource in both of our books. So this week, we wanted to highlight their extensive lineup of sewing classes. I don't know if you can tell if you're watching us online, but I'm actually sitting in my mom's sewing studio. So I have, a real connection to this idea that like there's a lot to be learned about sewing. I definitely made my kiddo learn how to hand sew, and he's done some sewing with machines. And so I think this is a really important skill. If you aren't able to teach it at home, or if it's just not your cup of tea, it's one of those skills that's being lost. And so, yeah, learners can sign up for everything from getting to know your sewing machine to one-on-one classes where they learn, like they work on intricate cosplay costumes and or garments and things like that. So tons and tons of options. You can find the link to their course catalog in the description below, wherever you're listening, or in our Instagram bio. And as a premier sponsor here at Homeschool Moms Unfiltered, we are able to offer our listeners $15 off your first Hub of Curiosity class. So if you would like to utilize that coupon, once you actually go in to sign up, you use the code of Cure 115. So that's OFCUR 115. And that'll get you $15 off your first Hub of Curiosity class as a listener here at Homeschool Moms Unfiltered.
Yeah. All right. Well, on to screens, which also present life skills in their own way, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So what we did for today's episode is kind of break down segments of screen discussion, right? From limits and safety and the way we utilize screens and social media and stuff like that. And we're going to kind of tackle each option, and then Amanda will share what's working for her or her stance on those things. And then I will do the same. So our first one is, do you differentiate between school-related screens and pleasure-related screens? Pleasure-related was like probably not a great word there, because it feels like, so how much porn does your kid watch, Amanda? Like, what we mean by pleasure, like pleasure meaning like free time activities or pursuits of interest, right?
My kid does not yet use his e-reader to read the smut books that I read on mine. That's not happening here.
So how are you differentiating screen use, Amanda?
Yeah, so there is a difference in our house. In our house, we very much differentiate between school-related screens and more free time screen time. And honestly, free time screen time is really limited in our house, even still. So again, a recap: I have a 10-year-old, and he he does have an e-reader. It's just an e-reader, right? It doesn't have any games or anything like that. And he doesn't have any other personal devices that he is allowed to use anywhere. Um, I guess that's not true. He does have a tablet that has very limited stuff, and it does not have internet connection. And he can use that when we're traveling, specifically on long road trips or on airplanes, but he's not allowed to use that in our home. It goes in our travel box and gets pulled out when we're actually traveling. And yeah, I mean, even with the TV, right? We don't have gaming. There's no computer gaming. There's no video gaming. The TV is one shared family TV in the living room. Occasionally, we watch stuff in the evenings together as a family. Um, but for the most part, he only gets to watch whatever he wants to watch on Sunday mornings. So that's kind of a throwback to when I was growing up and we had Sunday morning cartoons. That's kind of how it started. And now it's, I mean, he'll watch documentaries on whatever he's interested in, and sometimes cartoons and things like that. But he has a big chunk of time on Sunday morning that he gets to veg in front of the TV and eat cereal and, kind of do whatever. But outside of that, we have really, we quite limit our screen time, and in large part for the whole family. I mean, we do read a lot. We are, and I am on social media. Obviously, we do this. And so I'm on social media doing that sort of thing. But yeah, we're not we don't watch a lot of TV, and none of us game and that kind of stuff. How about you? What do you guys do? I know it's quite different in your home.
It is quite different. Yeah. And I think there's some complexity to that, right? So you started off with your kid is 10. So my kids are 16, 15, and 12. So especially the ones that are a little bit older are just going to navigate the world differently. My 16-year-old is in college. Well, the 16 and 15 are both in college, but my 16-year-old has made some friends in college. He's playing Magic the Gathering with a boy I say a boy, he's 19. It's like, but I'm like, he's got a play date with a boy from his class tomorrow. Like, I'm so excited for him. So he's made some friends through school. And so he's allowed to, obviously communicate and text and all that stuff. So obviously my teens are using technology differently than a 10-year-old would, even in my house, right? The limitations would be different. They're making friends outside of my connections for them, which would have been the case when they were younger. They're communicating with friends. My 16-year-old went to an unschooling camp last year. He's actually leaving for camp in like 2 weeks again. And so he's got friends that live all over the world that he's met at camp. He went to Berlin last year for a month, and he's going to Greece and Turkey next year for 6 weeks. And it's a kind of the same. There's common people between the camp circle and the international trip circle. And so he's got kind of these people, and, he's not running his plans by me anymore. So, it's like, he'll just say to me, I'll say something and he'll go, oh, well, at 7:00, I'm meeting up with a bunch of kids to play Scribble online from Berlin. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. Have a good time. Like, that's all happening independent of me at this point. So it is a little bit different from that perspective. So we have no differentiation between school screen use and pleasure screen use, as we said. Personal screen use, right? It's all one and the same. I mean, there are differences, right? My kids are logging into Outschool classes. That's clearly a school screen use, right? Or my daughter attends college virtually. It's located in Vancouver, and she's on Zoom for 4-hour chunks at a time. That's obviously school screen use. But then after the fact, she's online constantly, and it's like she's doing homework or she's researching things from the class, or like right now she's taking a class that involves branding and marketing in the fashion world. So she's got some Fiverr artist in Bangladesh working on labels for her, and so all of that meshes together at that point for us because it's all intermingled, right? And I'm not involved in any of that stuff really at this point anymore, except for just knowing that it's happening, right? I'm not screening any of that stuff. I will say I do have their emails on my phone, not so much from a policing perspective, but more from the perspective of like just kind of making sure they haven't missed anything, forgotten anything. Like if anything important comes through, like I could be like, hey, did you see that thing? Because like it came yesterday and you haven't said anything about it, So it's just kind of a touch point thing. Um, so we've got kind of those connections there. You mentioned gaming. We do have a little bit of gaming, which was a very late addition for us. And I'm really glad that it was a late addition for us because I feel like my kids had time to develop their personalities and their interests and their all of that. Like at 10 years old, like your kiddo, we did not have any gaming whatsoever. We got actually, it was like around that time that we got our first gaming console, and I was really, really nervous about doing it. Like I felt like I was opening Pandora's box. It was not something that I was super excited about. Um, but we have a kid who loves all things cars and automotive and this and that. And he had gone to the Formula One race in Austin, and somebody had a driving simulator set up, and he wanted to be able to do the driving simulator. And so I thought, okay, that's like a small cracking open of the door into the world of gaming. Um, and they do have some games that they play, but it's not a 24/7 thing. And I think again, it's because they developed interests before we got to that point, right? So it's one thing in their interest caddy, all right? Like they've got all this other stuff, and every once in a while, and it's like us, right? I mean, every once in a while we want to zone out and just have like we call it like noodling in our house. Like I just want to go noodle in my bed and like play Tetris on my phone and watch a crime show on Netflix, right? And so I think that's kind of like one of their noodling components is like every once in a while. And then sometimes gaming has become a really fun family thing. It's not a huge component of our lives, but like a year and a half ago now, I want to say, my oldest, every once in a while, they'll play Fall Guys, which is the most ridiculous game ever. Um, are you familiar at all, Amanda, with Fall Guys?
Mhm.
Okay. They're like, it's kind of like American Ninja Warrior with like obstacle courses and stuff, but you're like a bean that has like arms and legs and a face, and and they run around like this really goofy, like running thing, but it's the dumbest thing ever, but it's just silly, right? And so
Mhm.
and you watch, and when they get like whacked with one of the obstacle things or whatever, they go like flying off and we're all like, and so it's become like a fun family thing for us to sit
Mhm.
there and kind of like watch this together. And so my oldest son, for whatever reason, like a year and a half ago, it was Halloween time, and you could earn points to get these slippers to put on your um bean, right? Because you can dress them
Mhm.
up in all different ways. And they were called jack-o'-loafers, and they were like jack-o'-lantern boots.
Mhm.
You had to have enough points to get them. For literally like 2 straight days, it was the talk of the household. Like have you gotten the
Mhm.
jack-o'-loafers? And we'd all be sitting there watching him play, and he'd be like, I'm one level closer to the jack-o'-loafers, right? So it hasn't for us. I know sometimes we hear like gaming is like isolating and things like that. For us, we haven't had that experience. It's not in their rooms or anything like that. So when they are playing, it's oftentimes like a big family thing. Like my mom
Mhm.
knows how Rocket League tournaments work, and she'll literally sit there and be like, "Go Zippy Cutlass," which is his name on Rocket League, like. And my mom will sit there, and it's like one of their bonding things that they do
Mhm.
is like they hang out. My mom doesn't play, but she knows all the rules and the stats and the whole thing at this point. Like it's kind of cute. So we do have some of that. The other thing I wanted to bring up too is the ADHD component, right? So, I myself am thoroughly convinced. I have 3 ADHD children, and the more that I've immersed myself in that world, I'm like, oh, I am like 1000% ADHD, and I'm actually going through the diagnosis process. It just takes a really long time. But I'm almost done, so I'm super excited about that. But there is a thing with ADHD about needing multiple inputs in order to focus. So that's a big thing for my youngest kid. Like, for example, in order for him to read a book, he needs really loud music playing. I could not read a book with really loud music playing. He can't focus without that. So everything he's doing, there's always background noise. There's a podcast, there's a video, there's a live stream, there's always something going in the background, and it helps him focus. So screens have been essential to us in that regard, or technology, not necessarily even
Yeah.
screens, because sometimes it's a podcast, because he can never just go for a walk. His brain just it can't, right?
Hmm.
And he has very severe ADHD and he takes medication and it's a whole thing, but he needs 3, 4, 5 input senses going all at the same time in order for his brain to kind of fire the way he likes for it to. So there's that component as well, where screens kind of became essential. I myself, when I'm working at my desk, always have Netflix on. Always. And I've got different categories, right? If I'm doing something that's really boring work, I'll put something interesting on Netflix that I want to watch. So like last night, I was just doing some like social media stuff that was like not, I didn't need a lot of brain power for it. And so I watched Hillbilly Elegy. Have you watched it yet, Amanda?
No,
Okay. It's
no.
it's trending.
I
It's
know,
trending
I
because
know, but
of
I'm hesitant to give any money in that direction, right? I'll just listen to everyone else's reviews.
I
Okay.
know. I needed to be informed, right? So
Yeah.
I watched it because it's JD Vance and he's just been nominated, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, because what I was doing was kind of mundane, I could do that because I could focus on the movie. If I'm doing something where I need to focus on what I'm doing for work, I have like what I call background shows, like The Crown. I know it by heart. I've seen it a million times. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Outlander, Bridgerton. They're memorized. I know them inside out. And so they're on as background noise, but I can't focus without them being on. So it's like there needs to be some sort of sound that channels out everything else. So I think there's a component of neurodivergence too that parents should be aware of, because if you're not neurodivergent and your kid is, respecting the fact when they're telling you that that's helping them, like to know that that component does exist for some
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah. And I think there are various ways to address it too, right? You sort of mentioned the podcast thing and the difference between screen time and technology. And so I am pretty hardcore about screen time. But from a very young age, my kiddo has had I don't know, an Alexa Dot or whatever they are in his room, right? And so it started out as truly just the kids version that's super locked down, and it's grown, and we add books to it now, and it has, like it has a lot more access, though still not just a regular one that he can access anything. But he does also need quite a bit of sound. I don't understand how he does so much with so much extra sound going on. And two, it's that thing, it also matters what you've got going on in life. Like, I know I sat here and I said we don't do much screen time. But the flip side is we were foster parents for several years and we focused on babies and oftentimes medically fragile babies straight out of the NICU, which meant loads of long late nights just rocking a baby that had no desire to sleep because they were still going through withdrawal or whatever the case may be. And I'm not going to sit up in the middle of the night in a dark room for hours just rocking a baby who's crying and not lose my mind, right? So like I also have those shows. I think gosh, what was it? Like NCIS, maybe the original NCIS or something like that. I've rewatched, I don't know, 3, 4 times, like just different ones yeah, you put it on, it's there, you don't have to focus on it, but it's nice to have something else, right? So it's about like stages and phases in life as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally get that. And yeah, and I think that's a huge thing with gaming, like not introducing it early and things like that, because it becomes I think there's a real tendency for it to become their entire personality if it's done too early, and their entire I mean there's so much stuff. Amanda's the study queen of the two of us, right? Where she loves to read all the studies. I, I'm okay with being able to encapsulate studies into like yeah, of course that makes sense, right? But the way, I mean, they've done all these studies about the way that the brain lights up from gaming and things like that, and like the dopamine hits that they get from gaming, and the way that it acts like a drug where it's like that need for the next high score and all that kind of stuff. And so to introduce that to young brains was not my cup of tea. It wasn't. We tried Minecraft for a while when one of my kids was younger, and it was a short-lived hot mess. So that's why I was like very cautious about getting a gaming platform again. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Um,
So, well, how about
yeah.
limits? So, we kind of touched on it, but specifically, what kind of limits do you have in your house, Megan?
So we do not have limits. That's not to say my kids can use screens 24/7, or do use screens 24/7, I should say. There's a few components to that. So we did try limits during the early ill-fated Minecraft disaster. It was bad. I turned into a policeman. It created tension between the two of us. There was always a reason why the limit wasn't okay. He would use his time earlier in the day, and then, the neighbor kid would come home from school and, oh, can I play with the neighbor kid? And there was just always, it was a constant negotiation. I felt like I was living in a war room. Like, it was just awful. He and I will say, with my kids, there have been things where certain games have affected them more than others that they've played. And so, like, for my oldest, Minecraft was a total disaster. Like, I don't know if it was the game, I don't know if it was the age, whatever. For my youngest, it was Genshin Impact. And he was taking a class on Outschool and he liked it, and they're into, my boys are they play Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and all that stuff at the card shop, like the physical card games, not a screen game. And so Genshin kind of falls into that world of, like, all those similar games. And my youngest came to me and had identified the fact that it was all he could think about. It was like consuming his thoughts. And so he made the decision to give it up on his own. And it was a really hard decision. So some games, I think, mess with kids, individual children, more than others, as far as like how consuming they become. So Minecraft for us was not good. It started out as like this really amazing thing, and then it devolved into server drama and just mindless feeding of cows. Like, I didn't get it. So we got rid of that. But since then, we do not have timers. We don't do any of that. Instead, what I did from a really young age was work to instill a culture around screens, and even broader than that, a culture around how we choose to spend our days and how we choose to live our lives. And so from the time they were really, really young, what we talked about was, at the end of every day, I would love it if you could identify for yourself, not to me, not because you owe me an answer, but for yourself. Have I grown today as a human being? Am I growing in the direction that I think is good for me overall? Am I becoming a more interesting person? Am I, digging deeper into my interests? Am I doing these things? And so I never really had to police, aside from the Minecraft debacle, I never really had to police screens, because that culture took care of that, right? There's not really a way that you can run around like a bean with jackaloafers on all day long, and then at the end of the day be like, yes, I am progressing as a human being, right? And that's not to say there's not learning components in games. Like, there's tons of learning in Pokemon and stuff like that my kids do. I love it, right? So it's not to say there's no learning components in games. There are. But if that's what you spend 15 hours a day doing, it's going to be every single day. It's going to be really hard over time to be like, I am definitely evolving into the human being that I hope to become. Right. And so kind of asking them to challenge themselves with those questions, I think, took care of the need for screen time in our house, or screen time limits in our house, because typically there is some noodling time where they're just like, I'm zoning out, but we do that as adults. And so we can't fault them for doing the same thing. They're small humans. They have the same rights and the same needs that we have as adults in many ways. But generally speaking, a lot of the stuff they're doing on screens is because it interests them in my house, right? Because it interests them. It's a curiosity. It relates to a project that they're working on, something like that. I mean, one of my kids came to me and he was talking to me about like the modern art movement during the Soviet era, and how like Jackson Pollock, this connection to between Jackson Pollock and Soviet communism, that I was like, where the hell did you get this from? Right? Like, it was the most random possible thing. And he was like, oh, well, like, it was mentioned in some book that I was reading, and then I started researching it. And so he went down some epic rabbit hole online. And the next thing I know, he's sending me links, and I'm looking at the links and I'm like, this does not interest me in the least bit. I mainly because modern art isn't really my thing. History and communism, totally my thing. But like, learning about that period in history, I love, but the modern art tie was not for me. But yeah, I mean, so he went super deep into this, and it's like, okay, great. Like, if that's interesting to you, have the best time ever. But he's growing as an individual. He's pursuing an interest. It was a really great, valid interest, something really, even though I don't share that interest, I was like, okay, great, have fun. So we haven't had to put limits in that way, because they have done a really great job of self-regulating themselves and using screens mostly for productive growth driven purposes.
Yeah. So I think it was different for us, right? We started actually when he was very little, 2.5. There was kind of this big movement at that time of like, give kids screens, give them a tablet with some games on it and have it around, just, leave it around. So it's one of their many toys and they'll learn not to beg for it. And it won't have to be a negotiation. It'll just be one of the many things that they want to play with. And so it'll really make life easier. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. And so we got one, we did it. It didn't have anything particularly special on it. It was, like, one of those like keyboarding games, and like alphabet games, I think there was maybe some Winnie the Pooh shows and some Daniel Tiger episodes on it or something. It was nothing particularly exciting, but that did not change the fact that we tried for months. We did it at least for 3 or 4 months with it, and we just consistently, he couldn't put it down. He wanted it all of the time. And the days that he had it became those fights, the power struggle, and all the meltdowns, right? The days that he was on the tablet, we had way more meltdowns and tantrums and that kind of stuff. And I was just like, this is not working. This is not how we want our life. This is not how I want parenting to be. This is not the relationship that I want to nurture and grow. Like, I don't want this dynamic in our family. And so that's when we actually moved to the Sunday shows, and it became this thing like, and so we have really clear, and I've talked about this before. My kiddo does really well with a very clear schedule and very clear expectations, which is how and why we shape our homeschool life the way we do for the most part. So for us, that looks like the tablet is only used when we're traveling, when we're actively traveling in the car or on an airplane. Sunday morning shows, you get to watch whatever you want. We're not going to, again, not whatever you want.
Okay. Pleasure shows.
Yeah. There's not so much pleasure shows. We don't allow YouTube for him in our home because, it's still, I'm one of those kind of old fashioned, he doesn't get to watch PG-13 movies unless I have pre-screened them and decided that they're okay. And what I decide is okay is based on his needs, right? And what matters for him. He's got a very active imagination. Something that I think might just be silly could scare him and have him up for nights, kind of thing. And so taking those things into consideration and keeping that in mind, but that's why we set that Sunday morning, you have this, we'll stay out of it. That's your time with the TV, but you don't have other time. And so it's not a constant negotiation, right? Like it's so exhausting having to constantly negotiate with your kid. Like, yes, you can have this. No, you already watched this. No, I think you've spent enough time on the TV, and okay, real talk, that happens in our house sometimes, right? Spring break, or, we've got something going on or we're not feeling well. And so we're watching a lot more TV because we're laying around watching, and it might be educational documentaries or it might be a cooking show. Who knows, and who really cares what it is? At the end of the day, sometimes you have those weeks where it's like, oh my gosh, we have done nothing but watch TV. We're coming into it right now. The Olympics are going to be starting. We're going to watch a shit ton of Olympics. Okay. And we're going to enjoy it. We're going to watch it together. We're going to have a blast, but it's going to open the door. And that's going to mean that after the Olympics, there's going to be at least a few days, probably a week or two of resetting those expectations, because it's going to constantly be like, oh, can we watch this? Oh, can we watch that? What about this? What about that? And I'm going to have to feel like the bad guy who's constantly going, no, I really think we should do this, or let's get a book out, or let's play a game, or let's, but we don't need to sit in front of the TV for 2 more weeks just because we were glued to the TV watching all the Olympic things for 2 weeks. And so, real talk, like all of the best intentions and all of the best plans, sometimes they go out the door, the window, because life throws a curveball at you. And it could be something as fun as deciding to watch all of the Olympics, or it could be something far more serious where, you just can't parent for a week or 2 and you have to throw those limits out the window to survive. And we get that, right? Like, no one's going to sit here and be like, oh, how dare you have exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And it's interesting because I realized when you were talking, like, I didn't really address TV. My kids are not TV watchers. They're just, I mean, every once in a while, my daughter is a little bit more, but it's the background noise thing for her
Mhm.
more than anything. It's never solely TV time. It's TV in the background while I'm working to stay focused. Um, but my boys are not TV watchers at all. And so we'll do like my 12-year-old is an insomniac, and so we had like a rough week, maybe a week ago. And so we were blowing through 90s movies, mostly comedies. We did like True Lies and My Cousin Vinny and stuff like that. And, we kind of had that, but that was it. It's over now. And like, I like it. And I don't like the fact that he's suffering with
Mm.
insomnia. I mean, at one point he was up 20 hours and the poor kid, I just felt terrible for him. Um, but, we snuggle in my bed and it's an event, but
Mm.
then when he's sleeping again, we're like, okay, no more movies. So, yeah, but generally speaking, I don't have big TV watchers, which is, yeah, our screen stuff just tends to channel different ways. So
Yeah.
for other people, it'd probably do the same thing as well.
Yeah,
Um,
well, and
yeah,
just before we kind of move on, that is one of those differences as well. Like my kiddo has done some camps, and every time we do them, I'm like, "Hey, did you connect with anyone? Did you get any emails?" Because he has his own email address for school and things like that. Like, are you, or and I occasionally look at Outschool will sometimes have groups where the kids can connect and online, or I know Discord is a big thing. He just has no interest, right?
yeah,
He has absolutely no interest in connecting with people in that way. So it's not an issue for us. And that will probably change, right? As he gets older, at some point, he will probably decide that he wants to connect with people online, or he will have better friends that live across the country and that he has to find a way to connect with them beyond just playing chess online and video chatting with them while doing it, sort of thing. But we're not there yet. And so I don't know exactly what that's going to end up looking like for us.
yeah. So it's interesting because that was going to be part of the discussion in our next category, which is social media.
Mm.
And for me, all my kids really have almost no interest in social media. And I say almost because my older kids are using social media mainly for Facebook groups. For the information aspect of it.
Mm.
But as far as like posting, here's what I ate today and taking a selfie and what, like, zero interest whatsoever. Right.
Mm.
So social media in our house is going to differ by kid. I'll start with my boys. My 12-year-old has zero interest in social media. Um, None whatsoever. He has a Facebook account only so that he can be in our family chat because we use Messenger for our family chat because we have a mix of Android people and Apple people. And that was just kind of the easiest way to be able to share content and jokes and pictures and videos and all that kind of stuff. So he has a Facebook account. It's not in his real name, has no friends, has zero interest in posting anything, looking at anything. I don't even think he has the app on his phone. I think he just has Messenger. My oldest child is 16. He has an Instagram account. I think he's posted to it twice this year, maybe. Right? Again, zero. And typically it was like after camp or something where he like had a thing that he was like excited about and wanted to share.
Mm.
But generally speaking, no. He has a Facebook account. He's in the family chat, of course. He's in a bunch of Pokemon groups. So there's a bunch of groups. Pokemon has all these rules and regulations as far as like cards rotate in and out, as far as like when they're legal for competition play, when they're not. So when cards rotate in, there's a lot of discussion in the groups about deck building and strategy and all this kind of stuff. So he's in groups like that. He's also in some local Charleston groups where they talk about, who's playing at what league this weekend. Cause we have a bunch of game stores. I mean, my boys, Friday to Sunday, I do not see my boys. They're gone. They're at this game store on Friday night. They're at this game store Saturday afternoon. Then they get a quick bite to eat and go to another game store for Saturday night. Like they're gone. They're off. They're at Yu-Gi-Oh! They're at Pokemon. My kiddo's playing Magic tomorrow. They've played One Piece. You name it, they're there. But they're there with all the other card nerds and they've got friends and they love it. So great, go. So he's in some Charleston Pokemon groups, and sometimes he'll need a card to build a deck or something, and he'll post in the group like, hey, does anybody have blah, blah, blah? Okay, I'm going to be at, this game store on Saturday for the 1:00 tournament. Are you going to be great? I'll get the card from you then. Okay, fine. So he's kind of doing that. He's living in his in his world over there. So that's the extent of it for the two of them, really. They don't really have it. And he's in, my 16-year-old is in some groups for blacksmithing and 3D printing and, CNC machines. They're in it for the information. It's kind of like for them to be able to go in and ask a question or to just be able to see what other people are creating as far as projects and stuff like that. They like that component of social media, but they're not in any, they never post anything. They don't have friends. They don't get involved in any of that stuff. My 15-year-old, as you well know, Amanda, is a different story.
And also, I will just say for the record, your boys do have friends. They don't have social media friends.
Correct. Yes.
For anyone who's like, oh, that sounds terrible. Why is she like not letting her kids have friends? That's not what she means. She means specifically they don't have social media friends.
Correct. Yeah. They're not following people. People aren't following them. They're not commenting. Yeah. There's no rude remarks or anything. None of that. There's none of that. Mm-hmm. Good point. Yes, they have friends. So my 15-year-old is an artist. She's a working artist. She's an interesting cat to go through life with because nothing has been textbook with her as far as here's how you would raise a 15-year-old. She is an influencer on Instagram. She has well over 100,000 followers. She has had an Instagram since she's 12, I want to say maybe 11, 12. In the beginning, we were kind of co-managing it. Now it's a business account, right? It's not a personal account. It's not where she's hanging out with friends or anything like that. Everybody who's following her follow her for her art or their fellow artists, and she's connecting with other artists. She's following other artists. We have filters set up on her Instagram account, so stuff automatically goes to her spam folder, marriage proposals, pictures, requests for pictures of feet, things like that, which are fun. She's a weaver and she works barefoot, so it does open a bit of a can of worms with the feet situation. But she's a really realistic child. She knows that these things exist. She's lived her life out in the world. She's traveled the world. She's not naive to understand, that these things exist. And so they go to the spam filter, they get blocked. We don't use social media in kind of the typical teen sense of the word, but it's not important to them.
Yeah, but I would say that's also maybe a family what is the word? A family philosophy. Culture. Yeah, culture. Yeah, that's a better word for it because you're not particularly, you're involved in Facebook groups because you participate in them for the information, and part of one of your many hats is that you moderate some groups, both paid groups and very much not paid groups. But you're not really the selfies and tacos picture kind of person. You're not even actually on Instagram personally, right?
No.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think it creates a little bit of a different dynamic. We struggle a little bit more in our house, right? Because I am pretty active on social media. I have a Facebook account that's more for friends and family because we have lived in a lot of different countries. And so I collect my friends and acquaintances from all of our different travels and times living abroad there. And, that's how we keep in touch. I'm not going to send out pictures of what's happening to, oh, well, these were my best friends from when we lived in Belgium. And these were my best friends from when I lived in England. And these are my best friends from when I lived in North Carolina. And these are my best friends from when I lived in Seattle. And it'd look like a spam email, right? If I tried to actually do that. So I definitely use Facebook in that way. And then I have a very small following. I know I'm not an influencer in any way, shape, or form, right? But I do have an Instagram account that's called Miss Continent Jumper, and it documents travels and things like that we do. And so I'm over there and I'm posting things there. It's it's a lot more carefully curated than what I share on Facebook. But my kiddo knows that I'm on both of those places, and I have absolutely no intentions of allowing him anywhere near social media for a very, very long time. That said, he is big enough now that I definitely ask him before I post a lot of things that have to do with him, especially, if he's a main character in whatever post I'm getting ready to do. Even if I'm sharing it with friends and family, I'll be like, hey, I wanted to share this. Are you okay with that? And most of the time he is fine with it. And every once in a while he'll say, here, take a picture of this or post about that, put this on Facebook kind of thing. And so we're navigating that in real time. And I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit later of why social media is such a hard no for me, for him actually having a social media account. But yeah, I think it's more challenging to navigate that when you as the parent are active on social media and that's part of your family culture.
Which I think makes sense. I mean, like when we had Jackson Pierce on and we were talking about writing, Jackson Pierce was like, well, do you model writing, even if it's just journaling and casual or something? And we've talked about it with reading, how do I get my kid to enjoy reading? Well, do you enjoy reading? Right? Like,
Yeah.
If you're not modeling the fact that reading is this amazing gift to treasure, they're not going to feel that way. Right. So it's kind of like everything else. We are their mirror. They are their reflection, right? There's so much to that. So it sounded like you started to talk about safety a little bit when you said like there's a myriad of reasons why I wouldn't. So that's our next topic. You want to get us there, Amanda?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the internet is in a lot, it's a scary place for a lot of reasons, whether it's actual true safety or it's mental health concerns. I know a lot of friends who have stepped back from social media because they personally struggled with the comparisons and the being able to remember, look, these people are just sharing the highs, right? They're sharing a snapshot of the best things that happened this week or this amazing thing, and it's a very curated glimpse into their life. And if you don't remember that, it's really easy to get sucked into trying to be that all the time, and that it is a mental health issue to make sure that you're remembering the reality of those. You see them on Instagram a lot, the like Instagram reality and real reality videos of like, this is what it looks like, but this is what it actually looks like. And I know for me personally, I feel like I have a pretty good balance with that. But the reality is kids, their brains are not fully developed. And it's a lot harder for them to remember that once they get sucked into it. So for me, that plays a big part in why we don't. And then also, back in the good old days, it was a lot harder for people to lie about who they were in person. And, these days there's a lot of stuff on the internet, unfortunately, where predators can and do lie about who they are, whether it's scams for money or it's, much more nefarious and, pedophiles who have no business contacting kids over things. And it can be really, again, it's just that thing. Their brains are not fully developed yet. And it can be very hard for them to figure out what's real and what's not. And even if you can prove to them that it's not, you show me a teenager who wants to believe that their responsible adult knows better than them.
Yeah.
You show me that teenager and we'll talk.
Yeah. I mean, I had a chat last night with my oldest, and I won't go into full detail because to your point, like about what we share about our own kids and stuff like that, right? But I'll kind of give a general overview. But, I had a situation with a friend recently who is an amazing, super involved, super cautious parent with a very smart child who's been raised in a wonderful environment and all this, had safeguards in place with bark, and had a very dangerous situation occur in their family, right? And so, it definitely, it was a wake-up call for me where you're like, yeah, you're thinking, oh, my kids are street smart and this, that, and the other thing. But it's like, to your point, their brains are not fully, they're going to do stupid things,
They're
right?
going to
They
make
just are.
mistakes. Yeah, they're
Of
going to,
course, yeah.
they're going to make mistakes. They're going to do stupid things. It's part of growing up and learning how to do better. And so,
Yep.
yeah, just making sure that you're there and you have their back and you're doing that constant education so that the mistakes they make aren't life altering or life ending, God forbid, mistakes.
I've kind of had this recurring TED Talk series with my kids called "Don't Be an Idiot on the Internet," and the recurring message has been everything that is on the internet is there forever. Sharing photos can change your life forever, right? Their parent
Mhm.
gets a hold of that, and you get reported as a sexual predator, and all this stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you cannot consent. You think there's something. I'm like, never send a bodily part photo ever, right? Like this is just, and so that's kind of been like something we've been hammering on. But my oldest is getting ready to go to camp in like 2 weeks, and so it's all teenagers and you put them all in the woods for 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, after this situation, I'm like thinking, you think, oh, my kid's got his head screwed on straight. And then you're thinking, I see this situation play out with a friend and I'm like, oh, fuck. So, it was like we talked last night again about like STDs, about pregnancy, about this, about that, and I'm like, 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes, 50 seconds can change the trajectory of your entire life, and so it's like that whole thing. And so yeah, we've had a lot of talks about like what you post on the internet stays forever. Everything you put in writing and put out there, it is there forever. We see it, right? I mean, we're seeing it now. I talked about Hillbilly Elegy, right? I mean, JD Vance gets nominated. They found his Venmo account, right? And like dug into his Venmo and who his contacts are and stuff like that. Like everything that you have online is public fodder. And so that's been kind of our standard, like, whew. And, with this situation, like this kid, the scenario that I mentioned earlier, that kid bypassed bark in about 1 minute. I mean, it was like, it did nothing.
Yeah. No, that's it. They will do stupid things. And if you are being an active parent and monitoring, hopefully when they make that mistake, you catch it in the process, right? You catch it before it's reached the point that it can't be undone, right?
Yes.
Because that's going to happen too. You cannot stop kids or teens 100% of the time. And that's an unrealistic expectation to put on yourself. But, again, having frequent conversations and beyond that, I'm sure our kind of our next topic we were going to talk about is digital literacy, and going along with the safety and all of that. There are classes to take. I definitely have signed my kid up for a few different classes on how, common sense things, how to tell if a source is a reliable source on the internet, but also who to interact with or who not to interact with. Don't go in the comment sections. We all know the comment sections are an awful place, for a lot of reasons. Again, both mental health and a great place for predators to scoop people up. And it's that thing. If you don't feel confident teaching it, there are lots of resources out there. Whether you're homeschooling or not, and you're listening to us, you can find all kinds of unit studies and free classes and free resources. And there are classes on OutSchool. That's where we have done some through local schools to us. And then we've also done some on OutSchool. Unfortunately, they tend to be pretty expensive, but this is one of those things that I think is worth spending the money on if you don't feel confident doing it yourself. Or if you just, you want to do that. What is it? They called it the Swiss cheese method. They talked about that all the time in doing mitigations when it came to COVID protocol stuff. Like one mitigation isn't going to stop it. But if you layer a bunch of pieces of Swiss cheese on each other, stuff will get through, but the holes won't always line up. So hopefully it kind of gets caught, hopefully you catch it before it really matters. And so that definitely, I think it's important to remember for us, I feel like digital literacy it's kind of like learning to drive, right? I don't want my kid having unlimited access to the internet. All of our devices stay in the main family room. There's not, individual usage and private usage. And I don't know when I'll actually allow that to happen. He'll be much older before I'm comfortable with that. But for me, it's like driving, I mean, I've said he's only 10. But when we're out driving around, I'm explaining the rules of the
Yep.
road. I'm explaining, why I didn't make this turn or why I didn't do that. Or when someone makes a mistake in front of us, I'll say, oh, they shouldn't have done that because, technically you're not allowed to change lanes in the middle of an intersection. And I'm teaching him these things because it's a foundation and he's going to need that when he's 16 or 17, when it's time for him to go and take his permit test and all of that jazz. And it's an ongoing learning process that prepares him for when it's actually time for him to get out there and do it. It's kind of like the training wheels. We didn't use training wheels, but it's a good analogy. And I feel it's the same with digital literacy, right? That constant talking about it, teaching about it, the slow drip of information, so that when we do ultimately have to let them out into the world to figure it out, it's going to happen. It will happen. And you can pretend like it's not going to, but that's not going to help in the long run at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think digital literacy is super important, but it's an ongoing thing. It's like a steady drip, and it's important. I don't think that full access at all ages is great. But I also don't think that having it create tension and having it become you have to find a way that works, where it's not creating tension, because it's not going to be a win for your relationship or really the desired result for digital literacy either.
Okay, so we hope that this was helpful, whether you got something that you were like, oh yeah, I really like that, or you heard something and you were like, my God, they're idiots. I would never do that. You can take away whatever you need and want to take away from this. But before we move on to our rotating segment of the week, I just want to remind folks that if you want to come hang out with us between episodes, we host a Facebook group. It's called Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. We chat about homeschooling and life and also just have fun. So feel free to come and hang out with us. Invite some friends to join as well if you would like. The more the merrier, as long as you're nice. And if you can't be nice, we're in charge. We get to say no thank you.
There's plenty of other groups for you out there.
Yes. Yep.
All right, so I've got our segment of the week, which I'm super excited to introduce. So here we go.
Things that make your host say, what the
Yes, definitely. Okay, so our last book club book was Normal Sucks by Jonathan Mooney. And we did we talked so much about dyslexia, about neurodivergence, about affirming neurodivergence, the brilliance of neurodivergent thinking, all of this, right? So for one of my many hats, as Amanda says, I was working on something yesterday where I needed to utilize clip art from Canva. And I typed in both terms, dyslexic and dyslexia. And I went to the graphics section. Every single kid in the images that they had a frowny face. They all looked sad. What the fuck? What? Why? Why? I literally used one of the graphics that I liked the rest of, covered up his frown, and gave him a smile. Like, why is this child sad? Like, is his entire identity wrapped up in the fact that he's reading on a different level than other kids, or that he perceives the written word differently than other kids? No, this is so stupid, right? These kids are not inherently sitting in the corner thinking, oh,
I'm
right?
a useless human being. And if they are, you've done something very wrong and it's not their dyslexia, right?
No, right? There is brilliance in dyslexic thinking, right? Their ability to read people, their ability to think in three-dimensional shapes, their ability to analyze things, all of this stuff. There is brilliance in dyslexic thinking. And if our society portrays every dyslexic kid as frowning and sorrowful in the corner, we are dropping the ball drastically. So if you're ever just be so mindful of the messaging that we send to kids, right? Like, it was such an ick moment. And so I completely revamped that. I am working with, I was helping one of the tutors at Hub of Curiosity, who is a dyslexic adult who will be teaching classes for dyslexic learners, sharing how she herself interprets written information. Like, these are the things that work for me. These are the tips and tricks that I use every day. This isn't sad face information. This is mentorship. This is uplifting. Like, what the I was so pissed. I was just like it might be like a letter writing campaign to Canvas sort of situation for me. It was like that annoyed. And I don't have a dyslexic kid. I have neurodivergent kids, but I don't have a dyslexic kid. But just this overall societal view of neurodivergence as being like this, like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The pity, the depression.
Yes.
And you said dramatic. I would say tragic, right? Like it's so bad. Well, I will say that's a great segue to my cup for this week. We are working on merchandise. We're trying to come up with some merch for our podcast. And so if you can't see us, I have a cup. It says "Inclusive Minds Change the World." And we're still working on it and figuring out exactly how we're going to do it. But this is one of our first mock-ups of stuff. I'm pretty excited about it. So we're going to work on changing some of those things, right? Like, differences change the world, right? We don't have to all be the same thing. That's not what we're looking for here. No. All right. So I'm going to wrap up today's episode with our mantra for the week. I am the ringmaster of this learning circus, where every act of curiosity is a showstopper.
Yes, I love that we get to follow our curiosity. It's so awesome.
Yep.
Right? I like it. Well, thanks for tuning in today. We hope something we said might have been helpful in your screen quest, right? Of how to balance screens and learning and productive screen use and noodling screen use and safety on the internet and all that good kind of stuff. It's just kind of what's working for us and what our experience has been. So let us know in the comments if you have any additional questions or if anything resonated with you. And in the meantime, happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a great one.